Stories like Anakin's from Star Wars, Zuko's from Avatar: The Last Airbender, or Augustus Caesar's in the Roman Empire all touch our hearts in efforts to show the character's arc throughout the storyline or its history. Nothing beats watching Zuko overcome everything he goes through. But when we talk about these stories, I can't help but try to relate them to things in our world. Now I know Caesar is 100% part of history in the real world, thanks Dingus, but I mean untold stories, like that of the Phrygians. Nestled in the highlands and river valleys of central Anatolia, the Phrygian civilization once commanded respect and curiosity from neighboring powers. If we rewind to around the late 2nd millennium BCE, Anatolia was in upheaval. The Hittite Empire was collapsing, local peoples were vying for dominance, and new groups were migrating into the region. Among these shifting sands, the Phrygians rose to forge a kingdom that, for a time, challenged the might of Assyria and influenced cultural developments throughout the region. Often overshadowed by neighboring Lydians or overshadowed by the flashier myths of ancient Greece, the Phrygians left behind a legacy of monumental tombs, exquisite metalwork, and enthralling legends about kings like Midas. From the capital at Gordion, their domain reached across the Anatolian plateau, bridging trade routes and harnessing agricultural wealth. They also cultivated a distinct cultural identity, complete with a unique language, vibrant religious rites, and a style of art that inspired neighboring civilizations. This is a story about how the Phrygians emerged, why they held influence, and what remains of their once flourishing world. Over the next several sections, we'll unravel the threads of their origins, discuss pivotal moments in their history, explore the rich tapestry of their culture, and examine their decline under foreign pressures. By the end, we'll see how these Anatolian mountain folk, famed for their music and metalcraft, left an indelible imprint on the tapestry of the ancient Near East. In the 13th century BCE, the Hittite Empire dominated central Anatolia, extending its reach into northern Syria. However, around 1200 BCE, a confluence of factors, climate stress, internal strife, and external invasions often linked to the so-called Sea Peoples, sparked the empire's downfall. As Hittite power disintegrated, local principalities and new migrants scrambled to fill the vacuum. Among these newcomers or newly emergent groups were the Phrygians. The exact origins of the Phrygians have stirred debate. Classical Greek sources, notably Herodotus, suggested that the Phrygians once lived in the southern Balkans as a people called Bryges, and that they migrated to Anatolia, eventually changing their name to Phrygians. Modern scholars remain divided on whether they indeed traveled en masse or emerged from a local population that rebranded itself culturally. Linguistically, Phrygian is an Indo-European language, sharing some features with Greek, Thracian, and other Balkan tongues, giving credence to the notion of Balkan connections. However, their settlement in Anatolia likely involved a blend of indigenous elements. By the early Iron Age, circa 1100 to 900 BCE, they coalesced into recognizable polities in central Anatolia, stepping into the post-Hittite political stage. As local city-states jostled for supremacy, the Phrygians gradually unified under a ruling dynasty, with Gordion emerging as a crucial center. They inherited certain cultural legacies from the Hittites, including stone-building techniques and possibly aspects of administration. Over the 9th and 8th centuries BCE, this Phrygian entity grew in power, forging trade links and attracting the gaze of distant empires like Assyria. By the time Greek and Near Eastern scribes began recording their impressions, the Phrygians were entrenched as a formidable kingdom, primed for both flourishing and peril. Situated along the Sakarya-Sangarius River, Gordion was ideally placed to capitalize on Anatolia's inland routes. Archaeological excavations, notably by the University of Pennsylvania, have uncovered layers of occupation spanning the Bronze Age to Hellenistic times. The city's heyday, however, corresponds to the early 1st millennium BCE, when a series of monumental constructions, palatial structures, massive fortifications, and storerooms suggest a centralized administration. Within Gordion's citadel walls, the Phrygian elite orchestrated diplomacy, trade, and warfare. They also channeled resources into building imposing tumuli, burial mounds, dotting the surrounding landscape. The largest of these, called the Tumulus MM, Midas Mound, stands over 50 meters high and may house the remains of a king or high-ranking noble. As the kingdom solidified, the Phrygians expanded westward and southward. interactions with the Neo-Hittite states, Lydians, and Ionian Greeks along the western coast introduced them to broader commercial networks. They traded metals, iron, bronze, textiles, and crafted items. Eloquent in forging alliances and occasionally sparking conflicts, the Phrygians earned a reputation in Greek sources for wealth and artistry, particularly in music and metalworking. Their territory, though, was neither vast nor uniform. Local dynasts possibly ruled subregions, paying homage to Gordian's central authority. To the east lay the Neo-Assyrian Empire, a powerful behemoth expanding from Mesopotamia. Under rulers like Shalmaneser III and Tiglath-Pileser III, Assyria's influence crept across southeastern Anatolia. The Phrygians, often overshadowed by the kingdom of Urartu in eastern Anatolia, tried to maintain a delicate balance, forging fleeting alliances or paying tribute when necessary, but also resisting direct subjugation. For a time, the rugged terrain of central Anatolia proved a bulwark, yet the 8th century BCE brought about new pressures, culminating in a series of events that tested the Phrygian realm's resilience. It is here that the figure of King Midas steps onto the historical stage, overshadowed by legend, but grounded in real complexities. In Greek lore, King Midas is famed for 2 primary stories: his wish that everything he touched turned to gold, and his donkey's ears punishment from the god Apollo. These myths cast him as a somewhat foolish figure, undone by greed or vanity. Over time, the Midas touch became a parable about overreaching desire. Yet behind the fables stands a genuine historical monarch, Mita of Mushki, or Midas, who appears in Assyrian annals around the late 8th century BCE. The cuneiform texts from the Neo-Assyrian Empire mention a king named Mita of the land of Mushki, likely an Assyrian term for a region overlapping or adjacent to Phrygian territory. Midas emerges as a regional power broker. Around the mid to late 8th century BCE, he engaged in alliances or conflicts with Urartu, and possibly extended influence among the remnants of the Syro-Hittite states. Some interpret Mushki as referring to a part of eastern or southeastern Anatolia, but the correlation with Phrygia is plausible given the chronological fit and the presence of Midas references in Greek sources. During Midas's era, Gordian likely reached a cultural zenith. Archaeological layers known as Early Phrygian, circa 800 to 700 BCE, show grand wooden architecture, advanced furniture craftsmanship, and a hallmark of bronze and ironworking. In the so-called Midas Mound, Tumulus MM, discovered in 1957, archaeologists unearthed an elaborate wooden chamber containing rich grave goods, bronze vessels, ornate inlays, and a famed funerary banquet arrangement. While it's uncertain if the occupant is the Midas, the tomb scale suggests a royal burial from that crucial period. Yet, by around 695 to 675 BCE, the Phrygian kingdom faced a dire threat, a massive incursion by Cimmerians, nomadic warriors from the Pontic-Caspian steppe. Greek historian Strabo and other classical authors recount that the Cimmerians sacked Gordion, effectively shattering the Phrygian realm. Some accounts even claim Midas, distraught by the kingdom's ruin, committed suicide by drinking bull's blood, a stylized reference to dire humiliation. Despite the kingdom's downfall, Midas endured in legend as a figure bridging east and west. Whether he truly possessed donkey ears or turned possessions to gold, his historical reality underscores a Phrygian power that soared briefly on Anatolia's stage before succumbing to unstoppable external forces. Phrygian is an Indo-European tongue related to Greek, though its exact place on the linguistic family tree is debated. Fragments and inscriptions, mostly short funerary or dedicatory texts, reveal a vocabulary reminiscent of Greek but with unique morphology. One famous inscription, known as the Mid-Midas Formula, references a name akin to Midas, linking that text to the ruling dynasty. The language lingered through the Hellenistic period, though overshadowed by the spread of Greek under Macedonian and subsequent Roman rule. Phrygian religion famously revolved around the Great Mother Goddess, later identified by Greeks as Cybele, Kybele, represented as a mountain mother deity enthroned with lions. Cybele's worship involved ecstatic rituals, drumming, and possibly orgiastic rites. This worship soared in popularity beyond Phrygia. In Greek and Roman societies, she was revered as a potent, sometimes wild deity of fertility and nature. Other deities or local hero cults likely existed, but Cybele overshadowed them in the historical record. Greek sources praised Phrygians for their musical innovations. Some credited them with the invention of certain flute types, or with emotional melodies integral to Greek tragedies. Visual art and architectural remains highlight a penchant for geometric motifs, intricate wood carpentry, and megalithic rock-cut facades in central Anatolia. The famous Midas city site near Yazilikaya features a tall facade carved into the rock with geometric patterns and a large inscription referencing Midas, attesting to the synergy of religion and royal propaganda. Phrygian society likely had a hierarchical structure with a king at the apex, supported by nobles controlling estates. Commoners farmed cereals, herded goats and sheep, and engaged in local crafts. Overland trade, funneling goods from the Aegean to Inner Anatolia, propelled the economy. The accumulation of wealth, especially under Midas, financed lavish tombs and religious dedications. Thus, at its core, Phrygia was a regional monarchy sustained by agrarian foundations, trade, and a fervent devotion to the Mother of the Gods. The Cimmerians were a nomadic people from the steppes north of the Caucasus, pushed westward by other migrating groups, perhaps the Scythians. Around the late 8th century BCE, they barreled into Anatolia, first clashing with Urartu, then turning their sights on Phrygia. The famed sacking of Gordion, likely in the 690s BCE, spelled catastrophe. The city's grand structures were torched, leaving thick layers of destruction visible in modern excavations. With Gordion in ruins, the central monarchy fractured, losing hold on outlying areas. While pockets of Phrygian culture persisted, the sense of a unified kingdom dissipated. In the subsequent decades, Lydians under King Gyges and his successors emerged as a new power in western Anatolia. They too wrestled with Cimmerian invasions. Eventually, the Cimmerians receded, some subdued by the Lydians, others diverted elsewhere. Yet the damage to Phrygia was irreversible. By the mid-6th century BCE, the expanding Achaemenid Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great swallowed up what remained of the region, turning it into a Persian satrapy. Even under the Lydians and Persians, Phrygian identity lingered. Persian administrative tablets from the 5th century BCE mention Phrygians as laborers, soldiers, or specialists. Some served in the Persian military or in satrapal courts. The region's strategic location kept it relevant, but local dynasts no longer exercised the independent might, once symbolized by a king, Midas. Instead, Phrygia joined the mosaic of provinces forging the early empire system, overshadowed but not entirely erased. Thus, the downfall of royal Phrygia illuminates the precarious nature of early states in Anatolia. At the mercy of steppe migrations and hegemonic neighbors, the kingdom's bright flame was snuffed out, leaving behind cultural echoes rather than a lasting empire. When Alexander the Great swept through Asia Minor in 334 BCE, he famously visited Gordion. Tradition holds that Alexander encountered the Gordian knot, a complex knot tied to an ancient cart, rumored to represent the throne of Phrygia, or the destiny of Asia. The prophecy said whoever unraveled it would rule all of Asia. Alexander, either by cunning or brute force, undid the knot. Some accounts say he cut it with his sword. This story rekindled interest in Phrygia's mythic past, linking the site to grand imperial ambitions. After Alexander's death, Anatolia fractured under the Diadochi, his successors. Gordion and the surrounding region passed between various Hellenistic kingdoms, Seleucid, the Natalide of Pergamon, before Rome annexed the area in the 2nd century BCE. By the early Roman period, references to Phrygia indicated more a geographic label than a political identity. Cities like Apamea or Laodicea overshadowed old strongholds, though Gordion remained inhabited on a diminished scale. Under Roman administration, Phrygia was famed for pastoral production, especially sheep and wool, contributing to textile industries. Cultural assimilation advanced further. Greek and Latin overshadowed the Phrygian language, though pockets of it may have survived until late antiquity. However, worship of Cybele, the Phrygian mother, expanded widely within the Roman Empire, culminating in large sanctuaries in Italy and beyond. This ironically ensured that one of Phrygia's core religious traditions spread well beyond Anatolia. Even in late antiquity and Byzantine times, certain rural enclaves retained vestiges of the old Phrygian identity or local dialects. Yet the unstoppable tide of Hellenization Romanization, and later Christianization absorbed these into broader cultural currents. By the medieval era, the original Phrygian civilization was but a memory, preserved in myths, place names, and half-forgotten genealogies. Western awareness of Phrygia reawakened when European travelers in the 18th and 19th centuries noticed large burial mounds and rock-cut monuments in central Anatolia. They speculated about a link to the mythical King Midas. Inscriptions near Yazilikaya labeled Midas City fueled the excitement, featuring dedicatory texts with references to Medae. This ignited an archaeological quest. Systematic digs at Gordion began in the early 20th century, gaining momentum under the direction of scholars like Rodney S. Young from the 1950s onward. These excavations peeled back occupational layers, revealing monumental early Phrygian buildings, burnt layers linked to the Cimmerian destruction, and tomb structures boasting advanced carpentry. The famed Midas Tumulus M. Ed, contained wooden burial chambers with intricately inlaid furniture and an array of bronzes, silver lines of evidence that the occupant was a major royal figure around 740 to 700 BCE. Laboratory analysis of the residue in drinking vessels from Tumulus MM discovered traces of an ancient fermented beverage, some combination of wine, barley beer, and honey mead. Modern brewers replicated it under the whimsical name Midas Touch. These details cast a fresh, humanizing glow on the grandeur and everyday sophistication of the Phrygian court. Beyond Gordion, rock-cut facades at Yazilikaya, Midas City, Seit Ghazi, and other sites reflect Phrygian religious expression. Gigantic carved fronts, sometimes 15 to 20 meters tall, likely served as sanctuaries or symbolic gates to the realm of the Great Mother. Archaeologists have also tracked rural settlement patterns, revealing how smaller villages fed and supported the capital. Overall, the last century of research has significantly expanded our grasp of Phrygian society, from their architectural achievements to daily dietary habits. Ongoing work continues refining timelines, clarifying political organization, and shining more light on a civilization once half lost in the haze of myth. Alexander's dramatic cutting of the Gordian knot is a prime example of how Greek and Roman authors romanticized Phrygia. While the knot was real or symbolic, we lack direct Phrygian accounts confirming it as a central cultural artifact. Instead, it likely functioned as a local religious or dynastic token. The unstoppable legend overshadowed actual Phrygian history, forging an easy metaphor for decisive leadership. Classical retellings of Midas's golden touch overshadow the factual King Midas or Meda. Possibly, stories about Phrygian gold mines or the region's metallurgical prowess led Greeks to spin an allegory. The donkey ear tale also underscores how the Greeks lampooned foreign kings, implying vanity or comedic moral lessons. Some older scholarship wondered if the Phrygians were connected to Troy, the city that famously fell to Greek armies in the 12th or 13th century BCE. While Troy, Wailusa, does lie in northwest Anatolia, far from Gordion, occasional references in Homeric tradition mention Phrygians fighting as Trojan allies. It's feasible that early or related Phrygian groups allied with or lived near the Troad, but direct genealogical claims tying them as the same people remain speculative. What these myths and confusion show is that the classical world was enthralled by the exotic Phrygian realm, melding genuine historical kernels with moralizing tales. Stripping away these layers reveals a nuanced civilization, neither comedic nor purely barbaric, but a dynamic society engaging with the broader tapestry of the Iron Age Near East. Phrygian influences rippled through multiple channels. Religious spread, the Great Mother Goddess, Cybele, became a mainstay across the Mediterranean, culminating in full-blown cult worship in Rome by the 2nd century BCE. Romans embraced the frenzied, drum-pounding rituals associated with her, linking them to the original Phrygian rites. Artistic exchanges, Phrygian textiles, metalware, and musical modes piqued Greek interest. Some scholars posit that the Phrygian mode in Greek music references a scale or style, originally heard in Anatolia. Political models, although overshadowed by the Lydians, Persians, and later Hellenistic kingdoms, the concept of a central Anatolian monarchy with strong religious underpinnings may have influenced subsequent local dynasts. Under Macedonian, Seleucid, and Pergamene rule, the name Phrygia remained as a geographical label. Roman administrative divisions eventually recognized Phrygia as part of larger provinces like Asia or Galatia. Ecclesiastical references in late antiquity mention Phrygian bishoprics, while some heretical Christian movements, the Montanistes for instance, were teased as Phrygian prophets. Today, tourist guides to central Turkey highlight the Phrygian valleys, inviting visitors to see rock-carved monuments and valleys reminiscent of Cappadocian landscapes. Meanwhile, museum exhibitions spotlight the sumptuous bronzes from Tumulus 2000 at Gordion, fueling fascination with the banquet that once honored a presumably royal Phrygian occupant. Tales of Midas continue to resonate. Pop culture references to the Midas touch abound, rarely acknowledging the real complexities behind the figure. In unraveling the Phrygian story, we find a civilization that rose amid post-Hittite turmoil, briefly thrived under savvy leadership, then succumbed to unstoppable outside forces. First the Sumerians, then Lydians, then Persians. Their cultural achievements, especially in religion and art, outlasted their political sovereignty. On a broader scale, they illustrate how an intermediate state in the ancient Near East, neither vast empire nor tiny city-state, could spark legends that traverse centuries. The Phrygian echo endures, reminding us that beyond Greek or Persian vantage points, Anatolia's heartland nurtured a civilization with its own voice, identity, and storied legacy.